Apple recently refreshed their entire MacBook Pro lineup, and after spending over a month using every single laptop in Apple's M3 lineup, I know a lot more about them now, and there's some mistakes you'll want to avoid before picking up one of these expensive laptops, but thankfully, I think I found the right combination of power, battery life, thermal efficiency, and specs that should fit most users' needs, whether you're a normal consumer buying this laptop to use for the next 8 years, or you're a professional user on a budget that still needs a powerful Mac laptop to get your work done. Now, as many of you know, I completely replaced my Mac Studio in favor of a MacBook Pro setup, but I did have one problem. I needed more ports and a cleaner solution to connect all of my accessories to my MacBook Pro. Thankfully, our friends at Ugreen sent me their new RevoDock Max 213 and RevoDock Pro 210 to solve this issue. Ugreen's RevoDock Max is a powerful 13-in-1 Thunderbolt 4 docking station that features all the ports I need for my MacBook Pro, including multiple Thunderbolt 4 ports at 40 gigabit per second speeds, a display port, multiple USB-C ports, multiple USB-A ports, an SD and TF card reader, and a super fast 2.5 gigabit Ethernet port. And let me tell you, this dock is amazing. It's allowed me to complete my MacBook Pro setup, allowing me to connect two high-resolution 5K and 4K displays, my external Thunderbolt NVMe SSD drive with fast 40 gigabit per second high-speed data, hardwired Ethernet, all while charging my MacBook Pro through a single cable connection, and with power to spare thanks to a really small 180 watt power supply using GaN technology that I can also charge other devices with this dock thanks to the 20 watt USB-C port on the front. Of course, this is a docking station solution, so if you need something a bit more portable and a bit more plug and play, check out Ugreen's RevoDock Pro, which features a 10-in-1 design that works through USB-C and has multiple USB ports, an SD card slot, a 100 watt power delivery, and a fast gigabit Ethernet connection, as well as two HDMI ports for a multiple 4K monitor setup. So to get one of these amazing Ugreen RevoDock docking stations, check out the link in the description below, and thank you to Ugreen for powering my MacBook Pro setup and for sponsoring this video. So let's take a look at the contenders in this list. First of all, we have that new base level M3 MacBook Pro at $1,599. This model comes with almost every feature of the other MacBook Pros, including a nice 14-inch mini LED 120Hz display and an excellent speaker system. It does start with just the base M3 chip, which is still powerful at CPU tasks, and it has a decent amount of storage at 512 gigabytes, but it is hampered by a very low amount of starting memory. It just has 8 gigabytes, and that may be limiting for users and may even age less gracefully than some of the other laptops on this list, just because of how small that memory is. On the high end, you have the base model laptop for the 16-inch MacBook Pro. This starts at $2,500, which is quite a jump up from the base level M3 MacBook Pro, but it has an M3 Pro chip in it with the full 12 CPU cores and 18 GPU cores. It also has 512 gigabytes of starting storage and 18 gigabytes of memory, which is a really good configuration for most users. And yes, it has a bigger screen than any of the other laptops we're going to talk about here, but it's also bigger and heavier. This size will be popular with a lot of Mac users, but I still think the 14-inch size is the sweet spot for most users. The 14-inch MacBook Pro can kind of fit a dual role of not only being a powerful laptop that can literally be spec'd exactly the same as a 16-inch MacBook Pro, but it's also lightweight and portable enough to feel like a kind of professional grade MacBook Air, and I mean that in the best way possible. It's not even a pound heavier than the MacBook Air, and because of the shrunken bezels around the 14-inch display, it nearly takes up the same amount of surface area when laid out on a table. It's lightweight, and it's portable enough to carry around with you in your bag all day long, and it just fits so well on your lap or when you're working on the go. Even little details like the speaker grills being smaller and the keyboard being closer to the edge of this device make it more comfortable when typing. It is a versatile machine that feels just right in almost every aspect, and I really feel like the 16-inch laptop is more of a sacrifice. It's bigger and heavier to carry around, and again, even though it has a nice, immersive, big 16-inch display, I really still feel like most people would be fine on the 14-inch display of the MacBook Pro, and I feel like because the MacBook Air is the most popular laptop that Apple sells, this 14-inch MacBook Pro is gonna feel a little bit more familiar in how you use it because of its size and portability, but it's so much more powerful than the MacBook Air. On top of that, $2,500 for a laptop is quite frankly out of budget for most users, and even though it comes with an upgraded M3 Pro chip, the extra CPU and GPU cores don't make a ton of difference. That's why when we look right in the middle, we find the Goldilocks of laptops, the base model M3 Pro MacBook Pro that retails for $400 higher than the base M3 MacBook Pro. Get that right. There's the base model M3 Pro and the base M3 MacBook Pro. We're talking about the base M3 MacBook Pro, and it comes with pretty much everything that you need in that base level spec. It has 18 gigabytes of memory, which even if you spend $200 more on the M3 model to get 16 gigabytes of memory, well, you're getting an extra 2 gigabytes of unified memory pretty much for free on this model, which I guess is nice to have. Like, there's got to be one user out there who is just on the edge of 16 gigabytes of memory, and they get that 2 extra gigabytes of memory, and they're like, you know what, my problems are solved. I didn't have to step up to 32 gigabytes, right? That's got to be someone out there. On top of that, it has the faster M3 Pro chip, which is going to offer faster multi-core CPU performance than the base level M3 chip, and it has a much more competent GPU that will be able to handle more graphic-intensive games and applications. Now, you may have noticed that it's not the full M3 Pro chip on this base model, but I think it's actually a fine value proposition. You lose just a little bit of multi-core performance and a little GPU performance, but for most tasks, I doubt this is going to lead to any significant performance differences. Now you might be thinking, well, what if I want that cheaper M3 MacBook Pro and I spend the $200 extra on the 16 gigabytes of memory, right? That's gonna be fine for most users. I'm gonna save $200, it's still gonna be a cheaper machine, and realistically, it's still gonna have more than enough performance than I need, and you're not wrong. It is a fine machine and well beyond what most people need for a modern day Mac. But we have to remember that even though the base model MacBook Pro looks exactly the same as the M3 Pro variant, in the Apple Silicon world, the chips themselves really define the computer, and those chips determine the capabilities of the system, not how the laptop looks. For example, one obvious difference that anyone can notice just by looking at the outside of these laptops is that the cheaper M3 variant does not come in space black. And let's be honest, if you don't buy space black, can you even call yourself an Apple user? No, in all seriousness, it's not the missing color that you're going to be upset with. It's the third missing Thunderbolt port on the right-hand side of the device. That's because the M3 chip doesn't have the proper Thunderbolt bandwidth to allow another 40 gigabit per second connection. Not having this third port may not seem like a big deal, but it brings another full-speed data connection, which is really useful for when you need to connect additional displays or faster solid-state drives. Additionally, it's very handy to have a USB-C port on both sides of the laptop because if you charge with a USB-C cable, it means you can plug in and charge from either side of the laptop, which is a really nice convenience to have when you're on the go. Furthermore, just by looking at it, you wouldn't know that the M3 Pro MacBook Pro has a hidden benefit, and that is if you work with multiple displays, because the base model is only capable of driving one external display at a time, while the M3 Pro variant is capable of driving 2 5K external displays at once for a multi-monitor setup. And a multiple monitor setup is a feature a lot of power users either want or, quite frankly, need. And to top it all off, the HDMI ports on the MacBook Pros are not created equally. You guessed it, the M3 Pro version, once again, has even more capabilities because they are capable of driving an 8K display at 60 Hz, while the M3 can only drive, at max, a 6K display through its Thunderbolt port, but only a 4K display at a maximum 144 refresh rate. Too many specs, guys. Over HDMI. Additionally, the M3 Pro variant can also use that HDMI port to support a 4K display at a blistering fast 240 Hz refresh rate. That was a lot of numbers. If you need to go back and rewatch that, just do it. But basically, this thing can do 8K at 60 or 4K at 240. The cheaper M3 MacBook Pro can't. I'm not re-recording that section. And while it may not be as powerful as the M3 Max model, I actually think the M3 Pro chip is the one to get if you are getting a 14-inch laptop, and that's because of thermals. One downside to Apple making the M3 Max an absolute screamer this year is that more than ever before, it had to sacrifice on thermal performance. Even though these chips are incredibly efficient for most tasks, if you run an M3 Max chip at full throttle, you're going to hear a sound that is almost unheard of on modern MacBooks. The fan. Yeah, I don't know if this was necessarily the right sacrifice to make on the 14-inch model for Apple, because one of my favorite things about owning my previous M1 Max 14-inch MacBook Pro was how cool it ran, and because it ran so cool and efficiently, I never heard the laptop fan spin up even when I was doing intensive tasks. So it may not be the biggest deal when you're at home, right? Like everyone can withstand a little fan noise, but come on, when you don't want to hear those loud fans going off, sometimes they can sound like jet engines. And then if you're using this machine out in public, you feel a little self-conscious about it if it's making too much noise. But that could just be me and my overwhelming anxiety about being perceived in public. But yeah, there's also other downsides to that M3 Max chip, right? It's going to drain the battery significantly faster because it uses more power and has less efficiency cores than the M3 Pro. And efficiency is a big deal. It's why the regular M3 model, even though it's the weakest in this lineup, has 22 hours of battery life despite having a physically smaller battery than the M3 Pro and the M3 Max variants of the MacBook Pro. And I know if you're someone watching this video that was planning on buying an M3 Max 14-inch model, you might be disappointed to hear things like that. Like you're like, oh, I heard all these good things about Apple Silicon laptops, being very quiet and not running that hot. And for most use cases, that's still the case even on the M3 Max chip. But if you are doing more intensive applications, you might hear that thing go off. But I think a better way to kind of look at that is that the M1 Max kind of lives on in the M3 Pro, because in 2 years, you're basically getting faster CPU performance on the M3 Pro than you would on the M1 Max chip at the base level price point. And when you factor in that beautiful display, the amazing speakers, the connectivity, the portable size, the battery life, the performance in this laptop at $2,000 for the 14-inch MacBook Pro, I believe it represents the best laptop for most people in this lineup, if you're buying it brand new. Shameless plug to another video I did on this topic here. Because this thing really has all the qualities and features I loved about my original 14-inch M1 Max MacBook Pro, a laptop that I consider possibly the greatest MacBook ever made at this point. And this M3 Pro version is basically a cheaper version of that, so more people can experience the power and efficiency of what I first experienced on my M1 Max model. And yeah, you're gonna love it if you get this laptop. I'm telling you, this thing is amazing. But those are my thoughts on the 2024 MacBook Pro lineup and the MacBook I recommend to most users. If you like the video, give it a like. If you want to see more, make sure you're subbed, and I will see you in the next video, Space Cowboys.